In this video, I will demonstrate the installation of a Zeus fastener and the fitting of a door into your airfoil project. First thing we'll do is we'll establish a center line down the middle of the airfoil and a reference line to locate the end of the access door. I made up an access door here for demonstration purposes, and we'll place this door with a center line on it so that the center line of the access door is aligned with my center line on my airfoil skin. Now I'll take a fine tip felt marker and I'm going to trace a pattern around the access door carefully with the ink. And now I've completed the tracing of the access door onto the airfoil skin, establishing the size of my cutout. The ink here, once I remove the ink around the cutout here that I've just marked, I will have established my 20,000ths of an inch gap, which I'm going to be shooting for. Another thing we're going to have to do is fabricate a hinge. And so I've got a rough hinge here to show you, and I've marked a center line on the hinge. The hinge is not complete right now, but this is just to give you an idea of what it will start to look like. And I want to cut out a slot in the end of this opening for the hinge to fit on as well. So what I've done is I've got another prop here. I've taken the door and I've made a complete hinge, and I've put the hinge in its correct location on the door so the center line of the hinge lines up with the center line of the door, and I've taped it to the back side of the door. This will allow me to place the door back onto the airfoil skin here. Take my felt marker, and now I can trace out the slot for where the hinge is going to be on the door. So there you have it. There's the tracing pattern for the cutout for the door and the hinge. The next thing you're going to have to do is make yourself a doubler. So I've laid out here, according to your drawing, what the doubler would look like. I've got the lines drawn for the edge distance for the fasteners that I'm going to be using to attach the doubler to the skin. And I've got the cutout and the doubler located using radiuses and measuring in from the edges of the sheet. I've drilled little pilot holes so that I can use a uni-bit or a knockout punch to establish the radiuses and the corners, and then I will remove the material in between those holes, making my cutout. Here's the doubler when it's finished with the cutout in it, radius to the correct radius, and I've got a smooth finish on my edges in here. I've deburred everything, smoothed everything out, and I've got the lines on the outside where my doubler attach rivets are going to go. Once I've cut out this hole in the airfoil skin, I'm going to switch airfoils here. Once I've cut out the hole in the airfoil skin, I can position my doubler, noting that the hinge will need to be radius to the inside of the doubler, and that'll give me the location of my doubler vertically as well. So the doubler can move slightly up and down this way here, making sure I just leave a little bit of a gap between the hinge and the doubler, using the center line on the airfoil at all times to locate the doubler, keeping it centered. Once I've got the alignment up and down of the doubler, I can now drill a hole through the center points on the access doubler and into the airfoil skin. I'll just show you that for demonstration purposes. Drill, attached to my number 40 drill bit. Now here I'll probably use some Cleco clamps to hold my doubler. I'm using it as a pattern on top of the skin so I can locate accurately location. Drill a hole there. Install a Cleco. Center line is still aligned on the other end. Drill another hole. These holes I already have pre-drilled, so that's why the drill is going in so easily. You'll have a little more challenge than that. And then I can drill my holes in the corners. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And at all times I'd be putting Clecos in after I've drilled the holes. I'm going to put 2 more holes in here just to illustrate. These are locations that I'd want my Clecos to be in when I'm holding everything together. Now, of course, you will have marked out all the location of the fasteners on the outside of your doubler, and you'll have already pre-drilled all the holes into your doubler. So your doubler would have the holes into it, and now you can transfer those holes into the skin. Once you've located the location of the doubler using the hinge and the cutout we've established. So there I've located my my doubler onto my airfoil skin. I've made my door and hinge. I know that the hinge fits, and at this time it'd be a good idea to install my hinge with some tack rivets. Now I've got 4 rivets in here, but there's nothing saying that you couldn't just use 2 rivets in there to hold the hinge in place. Because remember, the hinge actually rivets to the airfoil skin, so it doesn't attach itself to the doubler. So now I've got all my holes in the airfoil skin and the doubler. You'd have to use your imagination here that I would have all the holes in the doubler. And I've attached my hinge into its location. That center line that I've drawn on the hinge and the center line that I had on the doubler has a really good point of reference. I didn't see it in this one here, but I've also drawn a line on the airfoil skin. And that locates the alignment of the hinge with the leading edge. So all my horizontal lines here, the layout line at the bottom, this line here at the hinge, they're all going to be parallel to one another, just as the lines that are going for my rivets, my attached rivets, are going to be perpendicular to those lines and aligned with the center line. So now I've got a cutout that is pretty much the size I would want. I may want to leave it slightly small so I can always do the final filing later on. I'm going to slide my doubler underneath there and Cleco it in place. I've got a center line on the doubler, and don't forget the doubler goes on this side of the hinge, so it take me just a little bit to align it here. Cleco in the bottom. Cleco on top. There we go. I'll put the Clecos in the corners. And here's the two Clecos that I was talking about, kind of going across the side like that. That supports the doubler on the bottom side. Hope I'm not getting too many Clecos here for you to still be able to see this. Now I take my door, which I have made, and I have a center line on the door, and I can place that onto the hinge, and you'll see that it fits in that cutout just nice. And if I remove the material accurately to that ink line that I had on the airfoil skin, I will have a nice little gap around my door, and the top side of the door will align with the top side of the hinge and that cutout. I've made for myself here some shims out of 20 thou aluminum that I can use on either side of the door. I'll place one there. They're about a 1/4 inch wide is all you need. And stick one over on this side here. And I've got two short ones. And I can use them just like a feeler gauge, sticking them in like this. Or I can lay them down. Now at this point here, once I've got these little 20 thou shims in there, locating my door, this is where it's nice to have a partner. I've got a shim in there, I've got a shim over here. Now that locates the door into the center of the cutout with a 20 thou gap all the way around the outside. It's a good time to get some masking tape. And you'll see, maybe you can't see in this one here, but the center line of the door may not be exactly in alignment with the doubler and the vertical position of the door. But I'm going to masking tape the door to the skin, and that'll hold it steady, maintaining my 20 thou gap. Using masking tape in the corners, wherever there's room. And this will now allow me to drill the hole through the door into the doubler to give me an exact location for where that Zeus fastener is going to be. Also at this time, I don't know if you can see it here, but at the hinge at the top, there's a slight gap in here, not 20 thousandths of an inch, but it could be up to 20 thousandths of an inch. And on the sides, the gap is a minimum of 20 thousandths of an inch, and I allow you to go a maximum of 40 thousandths of an inch. If you start off with 20 thou, when you drill and locate your Zeus fastener, and after you close the door, you can do a final trim if it just has any slight movement. So here I've located my Zeus fastener based on the drawing, 5/8 of an inch from the end of the door, and put a hole in it. Now that hole establishes the location of the Zeus fastener with a 20 thou gap around, the hinge being its proper location, and open that up to a 30, and then on up to a 1/4 inch. So I can open it to a 30. Masking tape, and that's all that's holding the door in place. Put your thumb on it, put a little firm pressure on it so it's not going to move. Double check my gap, 20 thou gap. 20 thou gap down here, 20 thou gap there, 20 thou gap. Everything's looking good. So then I will carry on I'm going to use a uni bit, and that'll open up my hole. It's a 1/4 inch. I'm going to hold it this way so you can see. Put my thumb on here to hold it. Now, how do you know when you get to a 1/4 inch? Well, if you're not sure, you could use a felt marker and mark on the uni bit itself the location of the 1/4 inch, or you can just use your Zeus fastener that you're going to install and see if it fits. In this case here, it seems to fit in the hole. So that's a 1/4 inch hole using the uni bit. Got my 20 thou gap all the way around. That now locates the hole in the doubler, the hole in the door, and the positioning of the door into the gap. And that's the trick to getting that door opening and closing in the center of the doubler hole, and still establishing that nice gap all around the door. At this point here, once you've got that hole drilled, 1/4 inch, you're going to have to disassemble everything. Remembering, as you were fabricating the parts all along, you've been deburring, removing all sharp edges. Make sure there's nothing that's going to interfere with the fit of parts as they go together. Removed all my clicos. There's my door. I can push out my Zeus fastener. And slide out the doubler. So I've got that 1/4 inch hole in the doubler. Now you'll see that it's slightly off of the center line. And that may be what happens on your doubler. Maybe yours turns out better than mine, and it'll be right dead center, and that'd be even better yet. The reason that is because when I installed the hinge and doing the cutout, I might have had maybe a 32nd of an inch misalignment. The time that gets down to this end here, the end of the door, that can be compounded to over 1/8 of an inch, as you can see here. I've got about 1/8 of an inch misalignment. But once it's all the ink has been removed and I'm opening and closing the door, I will still have a nice opening and closing door with a nice 20 thou gap around it. The fact that it's not directly centered will not be as big of an issue as a door that won't open or close properly. So here I've got my 1/4 inch gap in the 1/4 inch hole in the door. The next thing I'll want to do is to put a line through the center of that. I'm going to use a square here. My felt dip marker. I've got a line through the center of that hole, and on that line I'll have to measure half the distance across the spring and put the locating holes for the spring. Now you've gathered yourself a spring, and this spring will have to be centered on that line that I've just drawn over that hole. So I'll measure the dimension of the spring. Clean up my tools a bit here. The distance between the spring attach holes seems to be about 3/4 of an inch. So half of 3/4 of an inch is 3/8 of an inch. So I'll put the 3/8 of an inch on that center line. And to 3/8 of an inch there. And I have to use the fine point on my marker. And now I can mark it at the 1 inch mark and at the 3/4 inch mark. There, try that again. 1 inch mark and a 3/4 inch mark. And that'll be the location of the rivets for the spring. I can lay the spring on top just to double check. That's good. And there we see the spring will fit onto the doubler location, so I got the holes in the correct location. So I'm going to drill these holes into the doubler. The number 40 drill bit. Center it there. A little twist. Looking good. That one. And on the other side here. Now there is a special tool that'll locate these holes for you. We have it available. That's a great idea to use that tool. But if you don't have a special tool, this is just another way you can do it. So I've got the holes drilled in for the spring, and just to demonstrate, I can stick a couple long rivets through from this side here. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to stick a couple rivets through. Oh, I have to clear that hole out again. Tape's probably holding things up a bit. There's the 2 rivets going through, and the spring will situate on there like that, and it fits just nice on there. Now, some people try and put the spring on upside down, so we'll be putting it on the right way so you can see that. So now I've got the holes drilled for the spring. I'll want to dimple this hole in accordance with the instructions, and you'll see why a little later once I have the Zeus fastener installed into the door. Before I dimple it, now is a great time. Actually, no, let's dimple it right now. And you're going to have to use the special tools. I've got them here. And you'll have to read the instructions, and it'll tell you the appropriate block to use and the appropriate side to use of that block. I'll place this one on the vise. And this is the dimpling tool. Much like dimpling your rib, I'll be dimpling the doubler. So I'm going to call my assistant in, and he's going to hold the doubler over top. Now, this 1/4 inch hole that I have in the doubler right now fits into this 1/4 inch into here nice and tight and allows me to dimple it. So he's holding it on there, and I'm going to make sure that I dimple it in the downward direction because the door is going to fit on top. So I'm dimpling from the top side of the doubler down. Give a little hit, take a look. Doesn't take much. I've got a little dimple in there, and see just about center of those holes. Now is a good time to enlarge that hole because the Zeus fastener, remember it's just 1/4 inch, and the Zeus fastener is 1/4 inch, and just barely fits through that hole. And we'd like to give ourselves a little bit of clearance, so we enlarge that hole to the next larger size. Next larger size and 1/4 could be a G drill, or in our situation here, I'm going to use a uni-bit. And just take it to one size larger than 1/4 inch. And spin it around, and I can use that for deburring on the back side. So now I've got a hole which is a good clearance fit for the Zeus fastener. I'm going to countersink the top side of the doubler for to accept the countersunk rivets to install the spring. Once again, you can use the microstop countersink if you wish. I'm just going to use the Rosebud countersink, the free countersink. A little tricky here because the masking tape on there is probably a little thicker. The try to leave the masking tape on here for videoing purposes because it gets rid of the glare and the reflection. So I'm going to stick these long rivets that I have in there and see if I met my flushness requirements. I'm going to countersink it just a little bit more on that one. And the same on this one. So now I've got two holes. I can check them with my long rivets. I can hold a ruler or a straight edge across, making sure that they're down nice and flush. I'm happy with those rivets. Now I'll flip this over and I put the spring on. You can see that those rivets that I have in there are quite long, too long. So just by visual reference, I'm going to shorten up the length of those rivets for the ones that I'll actually want. And I'm going to call my assistant over in a second once I get those rivets installed in here. There we go. These are the correct length rivets. Install them in there and put a piece of masking tape across the top of those rivets so they won't fall out. So they're held in there nice and flush. Place my spring on here. And I'm going to call my assistant over. He's going to bring a C squeezer that we have already set up with the two flush sets in it. He's going to hold that. And I'm going to grab a couple real small washers and place them onto the rivet tails. And just by licking my finger, I can pick up the washer with my finger like a magnet and place them on here. This is where you need to have steady hands and an assistant who's not going to drop that for you. We're going to come over the top and down in there. And he's going to hold it down nice and tight to the bottom part, which is moving. And we're going to line it so that it comes down on the spring. Now I'm going to rivet it here, or squeeze it, but I'm not going to squeeze it all the way. I'm just going to squeeze it a little bit at first, just to hold that rivet down, because as I start to squeeze it, it'll lift the spring and the rivet up on the other side. And if it went all the way, it might go too far. So you have to put a little bit of pressure, hold it down, and squeeze. Now this one here I can squeeze all the way. And go back and finish this one off here, all the way. There we go. Very good. And as you can see, those rivets are beautifully installed washers. The spring is on the correct way, and I've got a dimpled doubler with a spring installed on it. I'll remove the masking tape off this side. As a matter of fact, I think I'll remove the masking tape off completely. And show you that I've got those rivets installed nice and flush. Good time to pull the masking tape off before you forget and rivet the doubler on with the masking tape. That's happened before. People leave protection onto their parts and then they rivet it together with the protection still on. Of course, that results in a loss of points. So, got the doubler with the dimple in it and the spring installed, and I can reinstall that back into my airfoil skin underneath the bottom side, back where I had it originally. Click goes. That's good enough for demonstration purposes, so I've left a little bit of masking tape on here so you can see it. Now this hinge, for your hinge won't have holes in it this time. It may or may not have holes in it. And your door, remember the door that we had laying on top with the 20 thou shims all the way around? So I can locate the center of that. you can actually put the hinge on top of the door and put the 20 thou shims around and force it down, and you can drill these holes through the door and then transfer the door up to the top. It's just a little tip there that you can do to help you locate your door. The purpose of this video is to show you the installation of the Zeus, so we're going to go ahead and install the Zeus fastener into the door. At this time, the Zeus fastener was opened up to a 1/4 inch so that it would be in perfect alignment, the door and the doubler. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to enlarge the hole in the door to accept the grommet. So here's a grommet. Put it on top of the vise for now, and I'm going to use a uni-bit. Once again, good old handy uni-bit to enlarge the hole to 5/16 of an inch is what it says in your chart, and so I'll have to go the next size bigger. I like to stop, check, make sure that I haven't gone too large. There it is. Flip it over and deburr the other side. It's all deburred. Good, we're happy. So I'm going to remove the masking tape because I don't want to have the masking tape underneath my Zeus fastener. There we go. Now's a good time to check that it is deburred. Check from both sides, and because I did use my uni-bit on both sides, giving it a slight little spin, I've got it nicely deburred, and I've got that 5/16 hole, which allows the grommet to fit through. Once again, choose your block in accordance with the instructions, the correct number block and the correct side, and this is pretty self-obvious that the grommet fits on top of the block just perfectly into that slot. So I get my assistant here to come and hold the door, and he's going to hold it so that it's flat, perpendicular to the surface. And I'll have to grab the correct tool, in this case here. And this is the tool that I've chosen, tool number 1. And step number 1 is just to put it on there and give it a light hit. Well, about that much there is good enough. You don't want to hit it too hard, just so it is belled out on both sides. I don't know if you can see it there, but there it is, belled out on both sides, and it won't fall out. So now, I'll insert my grommet through from the top side. So the top side of my Zeus is through the grommet on the top side of the door. Get my assistant to hold that, and change the block. Choose the appropriate block and the appropriate side to fit the Zeus fastener that I'm going to be using. And there he's placed it on it. And use the correct tool onto the door. And he's holding it nice and parallel. Nice and up a little bit on the back side there, right there. Okay. And it's going to give it a whack. Now I like to say you hit it until it changes sound. Now I wasn't hitting it very hard. You notice that I'm using a fairly large hammer, so I'm tapping it down nice and light. And it kind of changed sound, and that means that it's clenched all the way. And you can see, I don't know if you can see in that video, it's clenched all the way, and the Zeus is in there. And because the grommet swelled into the slot in the Zeus fastener, it doesn't fall out, and it's free to move. And there's a beautifully installed Zeus in the access door. The grommet on this side is sticking above the lower surface of the door, and that is why we dimpled it, the doubler, so they would accept that. So once I'm finished, this door would be riveted onto the hinge and installed onto the doubler, and I can use a screwdriver. And I have another sample airfoil here prepared that I'll show you what it should look like, your end result. So here's the end result. Center line on the door, center line on the airfoil, all lined up. My doubler rivets are perpendicular to the hinge line, perpendicular to this layout line down here. I've got a Zeus fastener installed, and the gap is nice and even all the way around. And I can use a screwdriver. If I had a screwdriver, I'll have to use my Leatherman. Open the door. The door hinge works nice and free. I've got that nice 20 to 40 thousandths of an inch gap all the way around. The door is deburred. I painted this in here red, just for filming purposes, so you can see that how it fits. And that's all there is to installing a Zeus fastener into your door, through your doubler, and doing a high quality job.